Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome. Come on in, sit down. It's time for part two of Adam and Matt hang out and talk shit about stuff.
That's a very accurate title.
Right? Yeah. Like it's we could give it a different title, but honestly, that's just what it's
That
gonna
would be
be.
any other title would be misleading.
I think so. Yeah. We don't want to lie to the people. So
Not
this
in this
is yeah, right. Not just now. It's fine. So this is a continuation of a previous engagement during which we hung out and talked shit about RPGs and stuff. And it was so much fun, we decided to do it again. Also, I just got to say, Matt, before we start, way to call me out on the internet. So,
Well, people are like, that was a great video. When you guys gonna do it again? And I'm like, I don't know. Adam's never brought it up since then. And I was like, screw it, I'll bring it up.
that is explicitly not true. Though we talked about it, and then I was like, we should do this. And then, as with many of these things,
correct.
it was like, yes, we should.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you about it again in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, just we're both producing, I think, quite a lot of content.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's a shortage of either Adam Coble or Matt Colville nonsense.
Yeah. People
But
just,
it just
they
took
need the intersection.
one of us saying, let's just do it.
Yeah.
And then it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for that. It actually did. When you tweeted that, I was like, all right, you know what? All right, I'll get off my lazy ass and I'll stop. We'll just pick a day and we'll actually do the thing. So
well, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Also, always leave them wanting more. So
there's a lot of different anecdotes about whether or not we should be doing this, but you know what? It's fine. We're doing it. It's too late to go back now.
Has it been 6 months since the last one?
It's been a while. Time has no meaning for me any longer. I have been excised from the time stream and now float in the ambient space of trying to create content. So I don't know. All I know is when my next show is. So.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last time we talked, you had launched but not yet like completed your Strongholds and Followers, like your Kickstarter, and definitely the show hadn't started because that's only what,
Right.
four.
Yeah, we just did we've only done 3 episodes.
We've done 3. Yeah. I caught episode 2. I mean, shit, let's start there. Tell me about this new thing you're doing. You've started a campaign on the internet.
So yeah, we play D&D every week, which is like, for me, it's the least remarkable thing possible. But we do it live in front of thousands of people, which is so weird.
Yeah.
That it's hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, so this is your first experience with doing
not exactly
on this level, or tell me more.
Certainly, like before we live streamed a handful of sessions. This is kind of the third go round.
Okay.
In the sense that we did it once for a couple of sessions, and every time we did it, it got worse. like the technologically.
Oh, I was gonna say, because I think I've been in those campaigns where you're like, this is great. We made characters. We're really excited, and then 3 sessions in, you're like, this.
Oh, me too. 100%. 100%. I try to tell people, I feel pretty good about the way this campaign is going, but I try to tell people, and it is, it's useful and necessary for folks like us to say this, because especially my audience is tons of new dungeon masters.
Yeah.
And I tell them, like, only a handful of my campaigns have lasted more than about 4 to 6 sessions.
Yeah, dude, role-playing games are like, they're like baby sea turtles. Only one in 100 will make it to the ocean.
Yeah, you have grand ideas about, or sometimes you don't even have grand ideas. You're just like, oh, hell yeah, I want to play D&D or whatever. I want to play. So you throw something together and it doesn't gel for a million different reasons. I think like all successful campaigns are successful the same way, and each failed campaign fails for a different reason.
Right.
Like, so like I thought this adventure was going to be more fun, or I thought my players would be more engaged, or, it just fell apart, or we got distracted or something. But then every once in a while, something hits and it lasts we play every week for 3 years. That's usually about a successful campaign for me. Typically lasts about 3 years. So we streamed a couple of sessions, and the technological problems were overwhelming. And every time we tried to improve something, it got worse. So we gave up on that. Then we took a break. And months later, my friend, who's the IT director at the company I was working at, and I both independently were like, I think we can do better. I think I got an idea. So we spent more money. And we spent more money and did more research and took some things seriously and streamed a couple of sessions, and those were pretty successful as far as audio video quality goes. And so then we did the Kickstarter, and I was like, if we're going to do this for real, the Kickstarter was half for the book, which is now out. You can get it in PDF. The hardcover won't be out for another couple of months, I don't think. And the other half was this space. We were being kicked out of our space at Turtle Rock. because they needed it to run their company.
Go
And
figure.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so that was the other half of the Kickstarter, was getting this office, and we've got tons of really good audio video stuff now. Although I will say that we've spent more money on our audio setup than I think we're getting value out of. So
That's the thing is, you gotta overdo it a little on the audio, like, because
Yeah.
it's the pin that holds the whole thing together. Because if one person is having audio issues or one mic doesn't work as well as the rest,
we
like,
we have relied on our own kind of we've gone as far as we can go on our own research and ingenuity,
mm,
and money only gets you so far. um, and we had a friend of ours who is a great audio engineer come in and do a bunch of work for us, but I think it's just been like, he's somebody that works in video games and is a sound designer, and I think it's just been like way too long since that dude has done any kind of live production. So now we're in the market for finding somebody local who can come in and kind of take all of the tech we got. I think we've got plenty of tech,
mm.
and actually make it sound good, because it's okay. Our audio quality is okay, but notice that we're sitting here talking about this, and what am I thinking about?
Right?
What am I thinking
Well,
about from one session to the next
so
is the
yeah.
technology.
So I was thinking about that, where I was like, cool, let's just get two of the internet's like most experienced dungeon masters together, and what are they going to talk about? Audio equipment. Because
Well, yeah,
like the DMing stuff, once you're in it, you're in the chair and you're doing the thing, you're not thinking about it as much, but in between sessions you're like, I can get that hiss to go away a little bit
yeah,
more, or
100%,
like,
100%, yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So the game launched, and it was my perception of it
Mm,
was that the first episode turned out to be hugely controversial, and I did not expect that. I didn't do it to be controversial. I did it to
right.
be dramatic. And so there was this huge clash, I think, between some of the audience's expectations and the players' expectations. And then we spent the next week sort of in damage control, me trying to kind of make sure people understood the context into which this campaign was being launched, because there were some people who for some reason assumed that I was going to be running like um, a beginner game, like that I was going to be running a noob friendly game, but that was
Right.
not the promise. The promise was it was going to be my next D&D game, and that's this. And so
Yeah. Yeah,
I did
that's
some
and
crazy shit.
that's a thing, right? Is like setting those expectations, because we ran into some of that stuff with Court of Swords, where when we
Yeah.
started, we said to people, we were like, this is going to be mechanisms heavy. We're going to be focused like very much on like difficult combat encounters. There's going to be a degree of like violence puzzle solving in this game, and characters will die. And even 40 episodes later, people were still like, why does everybody die all the time? We were like, we talked about this. Like, we tried to make this clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's and also you can't set expectations for stuff you didn't know people were thinking. Like if you didn't know the audience had some kind of built-in assumption, then it didn't occur to you to say anything about it. So
Yeah.
one of the characters died in the first episode of the game. And I think it was kind of a perfect storm for some viewers, because not only what did a character die, it was a character played by my friend Lars, and they don't know Lars.
Right.
They know me, but they don't know my friends. And so
Yeah.
now that they've seen Lars for a couple of weeks, they're like, oh, he's just always miserable. Oh, I thought he was just really upset because you killed his character and you're a
Sure.
terrible person and actually a
Right.
bad dungeon master.
Well, so
But
this
he's
is
always like that.
yeah, this is a thing that happens at tables too, where like the longer you play with people, or if you play with them through multiple groups, you develop a relationship with those people that may not be visible to everybody all the
Correct.
time.
Yeah,
And
100%. Yeah.
so like with me and Max, like Max does not know. We've played 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. He is playing an 11th level, almost 12th level character.
Wow.
We have been playing for 2 years, and he does not know the rules of this game. Like he just
Well,
he
yeah.
can't do it. He cannot process the rules in the way that everyone else can. And I know this, and it's fine. Like, it doesn't actually bother me. But
No,
every time
because
he
you're
forgets a rule, every
yeah.
time
Oh my
something
God,
happens at the
Adam.
table,
Yeah.
I
Oh.
bust his butt about it. And chat is like either A, oh, damn it, Max figured out, or B, why are you so mean to Max? And it's
So
like, no, listen, we have a relationship. It's like, you don't see this stuff.
no, 100%. Like they're. So here's what I think is happening.
Mm.
Wow, I'm glad. I don't know. I wasn't afraid we wouldn't have anything to talk about. But for those of you who were watching, I had neither Adam nor I have any schedule or bullet points of what we're going to talk about. We just assumed that if you threw the two of us into a chat room together, that we'd be able to create 90 minutes worth of content. So I'm super happy that we hit upon this to talk about, because there is a huge blowback. When I say huge, I would say like 80 to 90% of the feedback we get is super supportive, and people are really engaging with the content.
Mm.
And there's a lot of fan creations out there that's heartening, but the people who are upset are very loud. And the thing that they're upset about often is the fact that I think there's a lot of different things, but I think it all falls under the banner of, I wish I was at that table.
Right. Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I'm not. And so when I see there's this kind of like, I know the difference between a D8 and a D10. I deserve to be at that table more than that person.
Right.
Right. I know the difference between, surprise round and advantage from stealth. Well, I deserve to, and that feeling of projection, that desire to be the person at the table, and the fact that they would do a better job if they were there.
It's a strange thing, because I think, like you said, like they think that's the point of the whole affair is there's just so much that people get weird about when it comes to watching other people play games that they themselves feel like they are expert in. But I think that, that idea of like, for some people, that idea of you are doing it differently than I would can be a source of deep and painful frustration. But I've also seen people be like, I would never have thought to do it that way.
Oh,
like,
sure. That's
that's the flip side of that. And I love seeing that. I love when a player does something like they use a spell in a way that no one has ever really thought of before, or they've done something in the whole table and everyone in chat is just like,
we had you can see the comments in the YouTube video, is that I have what I would consider as a dungeon master. My DM hat and my designer hat are two very different hats. But as a dungeon master, I have what I would consider to be a healthy disrespect for the rules, because I have done this so much that I know that it's far more important just to keep things moving and be fair. If you can be fair in your rulings and make sure the players understand why you just ruled a certain way, and you didn't just screw somebody so their special ability doesn't work anymore, then you just keep the game flowing and you don't bog everything down by looking things up. But I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I mean, to your point about the having like a healthy disrespect for the rules, I think for me, I have this like grudging acceptance of the rules where I'm like, I hate this rule, but it's in the game, and we haven't taken the time. We haven't taken the time to redesign it as a group, so we're just gonna suffer through it.
Well, that's
and
another thing.
we'll
We haven't taken the time to redesign it as a group. What you're talking about, we hinted at this in our previous conversation, is that the rules of any given RPG they exist as a language that allows us to communicate. That's their goal. And if you and the players are able to communicate on your own, and in other words, as you said, we haven't redesigned this ourselves together, because even though you might be the person, the impetus of the design might come from you. You need the other players to buy in and understand what your thinking was and chime in with their reaction so you can tweak it. And then you have this communal house rule that you have developed, and now that's the way you play it. I got to a point in the very early in the game where I was like, early in the first stream, where I was like, okay, you guys are surprised. And I know that in my mind, I was like, I know that there's no surprise round anymore. It's just a condition. But I couldn't remember what the condition was. And I was afraid that if I looked it up, I would discover that I didn't like it. Right. So I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna rule like,
I know there's a rule for this, but it's probably shit. So here's what we're gonna do instead.
Well, I've since done some more research, because there's kind of there's the rule, and then there's the intent behind the rule. And I don't know that I've ever seen an RPG do a really good job. Actually, Dungeon World does a good job of this, where you explain the intent behind the rule. Right. Well, so there's a lot of like, well, here's how it works. Why does it work that way?
So I think a lot of designers, when they make their rules, especially for role-playing games, they design in with this idea that everybody already knows some basic shit. So if an RPG designer was designing, if they were writing a recipe for how to cut a slice of pie, right? If they wanted to write instructions, they would say, grab the knife. Now the rules don't say don't grab the knife by the blade, and someone would grab the knife by the blade and cut off all their fingers and be like, why do I have no fingers anymore? And the designer of the role-playing game would be like, well, obviously you pick it up by the handle. No, it's not obvious.
Well, you're right. You're right. And that's why I think a little bit, if I love 5th edition, I love playing it and I love designing for it. But I think one of the reasons I love designing for it, like if people object to my design, it's for the same reason that I love designing for it, because I can take my own nonsense ideas and graft them onto their nonsense ideas, as opposed to just trying to figure out how they would do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know how I think it should work. And given how flexible 5th edition is, as opposed to 4th edition, which was really inflexible, it's really easy for me to say, like, I like things that have a duration of a week or a month.
Right.
These are rare in 5th edition. 5th edition doesn't use that term a lot. And some people don't like tracking things that have duration, these natural durations that are longer than hours or days.
Yeah, all
but
you
I
have
do.
to do.
I think I like that. I think it's neat.
All you have to do in terms of duration is, instead of saying this lasts a week or a month, say it lasts 17,000 rounds.
Yeah,
This lasts 28 million rounds, and when you're done tracking all of those, then the charm person spell wears off.
Yeah, and that would. So I happen to like that kind of stuff, and 5th edition makes it super easy to graph that stuff on, because it does have language like a minute or an hour, right?
Yeah.
So it already uses some natural language, and I'm just saying let's extend that. But at the same time, so while people were freaking out that I didn't have the rules for surprise memorized, but that did prompt me to do a little bit more research on my end. At the same time, the next week, my friend Lars cast a spell, and I was like, that's not how that works. Thunderwave is a square, one facing of which is adjacent to you. It's not, it doesn't emanate out from you.
Right.
It's a square that you can place anywhere around your, and he's like, oh, and there were a whole ton of comments in the
I've had that argument.
Like, that's not how that works. And someone else goes, yeah, it is. He's right. And they're like, holy shit, we've been playing Thunderwave wrong this whole time.
Right.
And that made me happy, is that not only do sometimes we try to enfranchise chat. I often get feedback like, oh, silence isn't 20-foot radius, it's 20-foot diameter. Oh, great. Now we know, and we just learn.
Yeah.
And so we have zero latency or low latency chat turned on. And so just being able to go to chat and say, how does this work, is great, because we all learn. But then the flip side of that is people watching learn too, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think there's something to that idea of, like, I was doing some talks about role-playing games and running some games.
UCLA, you were
yeah,
down
UCLA.
yeah.
And it was really cool, because these were design students, not all just game design, but like there were some graphic design students and people just interested in games as an art form. We were all playing together. And I remember after a game talking with the players, and one of the players, who's also as an assignment GMing their own game of 5th edition Shadowrun, God help them. They've never GM'd anything before, and that's the game that they chose to
Well, I
run.
don't know anything about 5th edition Shadowrun.
It's a nightmare.
Oh wow, okay.
But they took me aside afterwards, and they were like, I just wanted to talk to you about something you did during that game. I noticed that partway through, you stopped to look up a rule in the rule book. And I thought that was really weird. And I was like, why is that weird? Like, that's where the rules are. And they were like, well, I thought
that's where the rules are.
Yeah, like I thought that the game master was supposed to just know all the rules. And I was like, who told you that? Where did that come from?
Yeah. I don't. It's so this is I think a well understood phenomenon. I have friends of mine who either do or used to work at Wizards of the Coast at a time when they were hiring like psychologists to come and try to figure out which parts of the game do kids of different ages and genders engage with it at what ages. And so he was imparting a lot of this kind of, they spent a lot of money, wisdom onto me that I got for free. But the thing is, RPGs, I don't know if it's that they tend to attract them, but there's definitely a certain kind of player for whom the juice of an RPG is that there is the illusion that there is an answer, that the rules trick some people into thinking that there's an answer in here for everything. And that therefore knowing all the rules, because there are answers in here. They don't like a lot of, especially teenagers, and I'm speaking as somebody who was a teenager.
Oh my God, me too.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
Weird.
I remember that era of my life, which I think some people never get out of, where you hate ambiguity. Teenagers hate ambiguity. Little kids love making stuff up, but teenagers want black and white. At least, the teenager I was wanted black and white answers to things, and was not okay with just like making stuff up on the fly. But I've now been through that ringer, and I'm a lot more comfortable now just like making up rules and not worrying about it. And I did a whole video about how the map is not the territory. Like, the rules of the game are not D&D, but there are players. There are, I don't know if they're players or not, but there are definitely people watching who wish they were, who wish that the rules were, they're, and I just assume that they're the kind of people who had like grammar teachers for parents and were raised to think that there was a right way to do everything. And that's not, that in my experience, that's not how the the world works.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what's so complex about role-playing games as a discipline from a design and from a play perspective, in the sense that we're giving someone something that tactically like feels tactily feels like a finished object. It's like it's a
Yeah,
book, and you can read
yeah,
a book. You can read a book from the beginning to the end, and you can say, "I have completed this book." You can internalize the things the book says, but none of that is actually the game. You're really just preparing yourself with a mental
yeah,
toolkit for the real thing that you will then refer to that tool
yeah.
set to
The act of
resolve.
dungeon mastering doesn't begin until you say, all right, when last we left our heroes. It
Yeah.
does, like everything else is prep, right? Everything else is prep, and knowing the rules. Like I ran an adventure. We're in the middle of adventure, or maybe in the first third of it, I don't know. And I'm trying to do a lot less prep than I normally do.
Yes, kill prep,
And
burn it to the
and
ground. I hate it.
it seems to be working. Like, yeah, it seems to be working. I seem to be able to kind of keep things moving and not have to worry too much about. And there's a lot of stuff where I just make a note of something. There's a psionic cannon here, and it requires a mind plugged into it to work.
Yeah,
And I have no idea what it looks like. I have
right.
no idea what the function of it is. I just assume that in the moment I will be able to make something up that sounds plausible and interesting and dynamic. And
Well,
so far that has worked.
that's the thing, right? Prep isn't it's not a necessity of play outside of when the game demands certain things. Like there are
Yeah.
certain games that say you have to be ready with these certain things, but like prep is a way I've always found prep is a way to reduce anxiety for some
Yeah.
people where it's
Prep
like
is yeah,
I
prep is
don't
not for
know
the players, it's for you.
I don't know the answers, and
Yeah.
if I sit down and I draw out maps and I like figure out all the details later, I will have to rely less on my own brain and more on the previous me that had more time. So I can look
Yeah.
back at my map and be like, okay, I don't have to make up what's in this room. I already know it's on a list somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that the more comfortable you get winging it, it's not like you are less prepared. It's just that you've prepared disciplines instead of
Well,
details.
yeah, and also every DM is different.
Yeah.
And the things that you as a dungeon master are good at, when you start out, you don't know what those things are yet. And in fact, you may have an idea of what you're good at and be wrong,
Yeah.
right? Like eh, I am relatively good at making up details about the environment or how objects work or how you might interact with them and describing things on the fly, but I'm terrible at making up names.
Right.
Like I need to sit down and make a list. If I have
Yes.
to come up with a name off the top of my head, it's going to be a terrible classic fantasy name with apostrophes through it and stuff like
Yeah, like
that.
Floon Blagmar.
Like
Listen,
Floon,
some people are
the
paid
most
to make that
plausible
shit
name.
up,
Yeah, yeah, that's
and
true. Yeah.
yeah, and there it goes.
So I know what and this is one of the things about prep is that over time, and this is probably why we all over prep when we start off, is because we don't know what we're good at yet. But you're going to learn as you run the game what your strengths are, and you don't have that means that's all that work you don't have to do in prep, and you
Yeah,
focus your prep on the stuff. Like I have a map of the ship that the players are exploring. I have a map of it, right? And that map has details about what's in every room. But just having that map freed me from needing that map. So I was
yeah,
like, the players are just gonna what is this and this also gets to the heart of my newfound interest in making D&D. This is something that hundreds of other RPGs have done, but I've never bothered with, is making the game more like a TV show and less like a dungeon crawl, right? Where an adventure has an act 1 and act 2 and act 3. And I come from a world where we measure project progress in terms of how many rooms have we cleared. And the players complain because we've only gotten through 3 rooms and we've been playing for 4 hours, and there's 130 more rooms to go.
yeah,
And that makes everybody really happy because look at all this content, all these magic items, we're going to get all this XP, and presumably really cool encounters and stuff we're going to be
right.
exposed to. But I'm like, you know what? I think this dungeon can be, there's going to be the exploration phase, the guard phase, the boss phase, and that's it. That's all it needs to be. And so that kind of prep now is a lot more
I
exciting. I think it's going to make a better stream, is my point.
Yeah, I found for me the thing that has really pushed me into thinking about games in terms of acts is doing streaming, right? Like I think
Yep.
way more of it as like
Yep.
an entertainment product than I do a dungeon crawl or an adventure in that sense, because those terms aren't useful to me anymore, right? Like the game has
Yeah.
mechanical phases we move through, but the idea that we are going to clear rooms or clear
Yeah.
hexes or explore certain things, like that is a background activity. And what
Yeah.
really matters is what is going to happen during Act 1 before our first break, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going to end that tonal note? What do I think of as an arc? And for me, the thing that's really pushed that is doing one shots, where I'm like, I have 4 hours to use
Yeah.
this game to tell a story. And we're going to, as players, all kind of agree that, like, if we're going to do this, we know we only have 4 hours. And so the players, I have to sit down with them and say, okay, like, I know that in role playing games, there's a tendency to want to talk through every possible opportunity, every plan, right? I know that
Right.
there is a desire to, like,
Oh, sure.
kind of
Yeah.
goof off or whatever and have
Yeah.
a certain pace, but like we need to do this stuff in this sort of relative order. Now I have a flow chart, or I have an idea of like different things that could happen, but by the time we get to the first break, you know, your character intro bullshit has to be done. So say what
Yeah.
you need to say, don't hold on to things. And then by the end of the episode, that's it. Like we get some kind of conclusion, whatever that is. Either you all die or you do your thing, or like, you know, we know that we're going to end it. And thinking about games more like shows has completely changed the way that I pace.
Yeah, and this is stuff that like I worked on one or two different versions of the Star Trek RPG where the whole theme was it structure your adventures like there's hundreds of episodes of Star Trek that all follow a pretty similar formula, right? We haven't yet seen the 22-minute comedy of
Right.
Star Trek. It's
Yeah.
always an hour long. It's always there's a teaser that sets up the right, and so there's a known template
Yeah.
there. But for me, turning it into more like a bunch of people wanted to know, oh, you're going to stream your game. What concessions are you going to make to streaming? Are you going to make it? And I think there was this notion of kind of without being able to articulate it. I think a lot of the viewers or the fans of the YouTube channel were wondering if I was going to sell out. And I don't know how I would go about doing that. I would love to if there was a way, but I don't know what.
Tell me what rules I need to use to make more money, please. Like, if you want to pay me $1,000 to give everybody an extra death save, fuck it, I'll do it. Just go. Give it to me.
Have you seen? This seems like it's your kind of movie. Have you seen 24-Hour Party People?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's this great moment, which is real. This is a real thing that happens, where the main character is being courted by London Records, and they want to pay him millions of dollars for his back catalog, and he's like, we don't own the artist's back catalog. They each own it. They each own their stuff. I have saved myself the dishonor of ever selling out by having nothing to sell. And so the people were worried that suddenly the D&D game was going to become, I don't know what, I have no idea, but there are definite things that I am excited about streaming as opposed to regular D&D, because one of the first things I noticed was when we were streaming, even back at Turtle Rock Studios, suddenly there was no table talk. Nobody wanted to stop in the middle of the game and just talk about work or that employee that bugged them. They were while the cameras were on, we were playing D&D, and I'm like, this is great. I love this, right? If this is some kind of artificial, like, we wouldn't do this if we weren't streaming, then I'm all for streaming, because it meant we got a lot more done and people thought about their characters more. And now, so there's also, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think there are layers to this though, right? Like, so there's the bullshit game session that you tend to have at home where it'll be like, we're playing and then somebody will make a joke and then it'll kind of break the vibe of the table, and then suddenly somebody's talking about Fortnite or whatever, and we're like deviating from that, and we don't get a lot of stuff done, but it's like people hanging out under the auspices of playing a role-playing game. And then there's we are immersed, we are in character all the time, we don't talk about the game, we just play it without doing it. And I feel like both of those extremes are kind of like bad for streaming. Like for us, the way that I tend to run games, I love it when the players take a minute and they're like, okay, I'm done speaking as my character, and now I'm talking to you, my fellow player. What the fuck are we gonna do? Like, what is gonna like this wizard is gonna screw us over if we don't figure out a plan.
I was really, it killed me. I mean, this is the tension. This is the real tension between being a show producer and being a dungeon master, is that we turned the cameras off last night, and the players continued to talk about 45 minutes afterwards. All of which needed to be recorded. I'm like, oh, the viewers need to see this.
Yeah, you haven't got that streamer discipline yet. So we have.
The players don't want to stream that.
Oh, see,
that's their idea to turn the stream off so they could have that conversation.
I want to give that to the audience. I want the audience to have that. We've started doing, so what we do with roleplay, we do a 4-hour episode. We take a 5-minute break to run the stream down, and then for our patrons, we record a post show, and the post show is that like half an hour of just talking. But the 10 minutes in between, we all have to be like, no, stop, shut up, save the A material, like wait till the cameras are back on.
Well, we've got this nice discipline where people show up about 45 minutes early. We have dinner, and that is our social time. So we're not compromising getting together and relating to each other as friends with playing D&D. We get to do both. But definitely the act of live streaming our game, as there are things I'm doing differently as a dungeon master. That notion of less prep and focusing on episodic act-based structure
Yeah.
As opposed to the way I used to run, which I think the players are going to enjoy more. I think the players are going to enjoy more. The act of taking this Mind Flayer ship,
Yeah.
like taking it, making it theirs, if they can pull it off, is going to be a lot more fun than it would have been if I were doing this 3 years ago. Because
Sure.
if I were doing this 3 years ago, it would take them weeks. It would take them weeks.
Right.
There are hundreds of, I got a map. There are hundreds of rooms on this ship, and they would have to clear them all. And, you know, it would probably be tedious.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not the 1980s and they're not that kind of player. But it's going to take them 2 weeks this time. And it was going to take them basically 2 90-minute chunks, probably, maybe 3 90-minute chunks to take this epic ship and see if they can make it theirs.
Like, I hear you.
They're going to enjoy that more.
I hear you saying how long you think it's going to take, and I hear you, and I trust you. But like, I will tell you, I did prep, and I'm notorious.
I'm going to give them the ship
there's
at the end of the second thing, just
right.
to prove you wrong.
There's a clip. There's a clip of this on my GM prep. So way back when we did a live show, and I was doing some GM prep for it live, and I got to the end. I'd done 2 hours of prep, and I said, okay, this will get me through 8 hours. Like by the end of this 8 hours, the conflict at the table will be resolved, and they will be done with this. And that prep lasted me like 4 months. Like because they were interested in small stuff, and they were investigating different things, and like you can't. This is the thing about prep, is that you can't predict what players will do or where they'll go.
You're 100% right. Obviously, like I have many is the time when I prepped. You know, I prepped a bunch of stuff, and the players always take longer to do stuff than you imagine. However, I've sort of structured that. Like there was a point in the game on Wednesday night where my friend was like, I want to see a map. I want to do this on a grid. Give me a piece of graph paper and draw this. And I just refused to do it. I refused to do it because as soon as I did that, then it was a ship to explore rather than me telling them, okay, here's the next. You guys go up this corridor. And
right. Well, so
right?
that's why
I am leading them through dramatically. I am leading them through Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3.
I didn't
give them a map and say,
yeah, that's the thing. You're taking away that control, right? You put the map of Chult in front of your players, and you say, Chult has 397 unique hexes. There will always be a player who is like, and I'm calling out a specific player in my game. Dave looked at that map and was like, this adventure is not over until we uncover every single one of those goddamn hexes.
I love that player, and I love that game. And I have run that game, and I would be happy to do it again.
Right. But there's a big difference. There's a big difference between the 397 hexes and Act 1, enter Chult, right? Like you're framing it differently.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think that it does require a certain mental adjustment, but so far it's the players are maybe 1/3 of the way through, maybe a fifth. I don't know. We'll find out together. You know, of the way through the sieging this kind of illithid Spelljammer ship, which, by the way, I never had any interest in Spelljammer, but in the process of prepping this adventure, I kind of fell in love with some of the ship designs, and I was like, oh, I think I get it. You know, apart from some players feeling like I want that dungeon crawl experience, give me a map of hundreds of rooms, I think otherwise the players are engaged and excited by what's happening, and it's less about you know, that it's less about player choice in the sense of which of these hexes are we going to explore, and more about player choice, how are our characters going to react to these things, right? And that is, the players have lots of opportunities to use this ship and use these circumstances to define their character. And I think that is something that engages them.
That's the purpose of setting in the first place. Like in the milieu in which we're creating fantasy adventure for people to consume as content, it's not about what's in this room. It's about what are the characters going to do in reaction to whatever is in the room, right? Like I think there is an audience that just wants to know what's in the room, and that's why I love doing my GM prep as a separate thing, because that audience can tune in and be like, oh, okay, I get to see all of this stuff, and I'm really interested in how Adam built this environment. But in play, you're not going to get to see most of that stuff, but you are going to get that chemistry of the characters dropped into that situation. And that's true of dungeon rooms. It's true of towns, of cities, of entire worlds, right? Like the prep doesn't matter until it hits the screen, until there are characters in it doing things.
And I think there's lots of opportunities for it. player choice and player agency is super important, but there's a million ways to put that stuff in front of the player that is not a map of 324 hexes, right? Like they walk into a room and there's a mind witness and 2 Githyanki, and the players figure out on their own without me having to say anything. They don't necessarily have to kill the mind witness. The mind witness is intelligent, but it's intelligent like a computer is intelligent.
Right.
Maybe we could use it. Maybe we could pilot this ship if we don't kill the mind witness. And that was their idea. I hadn't even really thought about that, by the way. I didn't think they were going to have an opportunity. This is interesting. Because we're streaming, I am more conscious of ending on a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
which means sometimes we end a little bit early and sometimes we end a little bit later. And this time we ended a little bit later. I stretched things out to get them to this cliffhanger where they're exposed to the navigation room, which is this crazy mind witness thing and a couple of Githyanki. And if we had encountered that at any other time, it would have been initiative and they would have been fighting, and they probably wouldn't have had the downtime to think about, maybe we don't kill this thing. But because I ended on a cliffhanger, now they're thinking about, can we? And that's a much more interesting episode,
right? But these are the concessions. These are the concessions that your like YouTube audience might, some of them at least, might think of as selling out, right? The fact that you are choosing to engage or not engage with certain mechanisms at certain times based on what you know about the time you have left in your slot for broadcasting, that is absolutely something that people respond weirdly.
Everybody watching has, a different metric for, okay, it's late, let's stop.
Right.
Yeah. And so showing people, here's how to end your session on a cliffhanger, which I try to do that all the time. I try to do it, as often as possible.
Yeah.
And that is a perfectly legitimate way to run your game. But yeah, correct. I come from a place where you stopped because you were physically exhausted. You stopped playing D&D because it was 3:00 in the morning, and you couldn't do it anymore, right? And that is not where my head is these days. And so for me, I think it's, again, what's good for the stream in some cases is good for the players. And also for me as a designer, like we have a couple of times now, we didn't do it last session because I really couldn't think of a way. We run a poll where the people watching get to role play the act of being someone or something and if there's a crowd, for instance, the population of the city of Black Bottom, the crew of the Ross Cielo, I say, how does the crew react to this?
Right.
And for me as a designer, that's something obviously you can't do if you're not streaming. But for me as a designer, trying to come up with, what's the poll going to be this week? How do I come up with 2 or 3 options where there's not an obvious choice, because otherwise if there's an obvious choice we don't need a poll, and there are mechanical results, there are crunchy results that are going to affect how the game changes based on this. That's something I wouldn't be able to do if it wasn't for streaming. And not only do I like it, I think the players like it. I think the players like the idea that the crew of this ship are kind of real now, right? It's not just Matt making stuff up. It's the people watching or the crew. How's the crew going to react?
And that for me over the last 4.5, 5 years it's been the thing. It's been the thing that I've been most interested in, above and beyond the way that running games online has changed how I GM, but finding ways that don't feel like a weird game show to affect the thing. Because I think since as soon as people were playing role-playing games online, there has been this thing where it's like, you can donate $1 to spin the wheel and get them a bonus or whatever. But as a GM, I feel like that's, I don't know, it's not the kind of input that I want from my audience, but that idea of letting them control some aspect of the universe, large or small, or turning over mechanical pieces of the game to the audience. Like in Burning Wheel, there is every 10 to 12 sessions at the end of an arc, you do a trait vote. And the trait vote is essentially the only way that characters can gain or lose traits, which is a big part of their design. And so what we would do, because our job is to play the game, our job is to embody our characters and to create this world, but the audience's only job is to watch and pay attention. And so when we get to the time to do the trait vote, I say, okay, everybody, you have, 5 minutes or whatever to kind of give your little speech about what trait you think you should have. Anybody else has any ideas for traits for your character? And then we make a list, and then we take a break, and we let the audience vote. And then when we come back, we say, all right, we listened to your arguments. The audience has decided that your character will get the merciless trait. And so that's added to your character.
That's cool. I mean, we had a moment where one of the players had to make a decision about who to promote and it didn't even occur to me to go to that player and say, because he spent the entire week messaging me about like which of the different characters in the group should become the next lieutenant of the chain of Acheron.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me to just say to him, hey, why don't you ask chat?
Yeah.
Right. He might have been like, no, I don't want to do that. But it would have been interesting to know, like, what, and it would have been a neat thing to have, like, what there's, ostensibly there's like 60 some odd ranking soldiers, like first level or 0 level soldiers in the chain.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to say, obviously the commander would have some idea what the people he command thinks about this. Like, who would they most want to see in charge?
Yeah.
So having opportunities like that for the audience to engage, to me, is really exciting. And it's, I think everybody who thinks about streaming and thinks about engaging the audience goes through this phase of, well, we'll just have it be like, oh, we'll do a thing where the players can get advantage, or depending on how many people are watching or voting or subscribing or whatever, that's how difficult the encounter will be. And I think that's a natural first result. But also, I think if you think about it for like half an hour, you're gonna go, this is a terrible idea. This is not going to work.
Right.
And the players don't want the challenge of the game dictated by the viewer.
Yeah. Well, I think it's understanding roles, right? And
exactly.
As someone who streams a lot of video games and tries to play games that have chat interaction, 9 times out of 10, chat will make things harder than you can possibly deal with them if they have that option, right? If you're like,
so don't give them that. That's not what they're there.
Exactly. You don't give them the rules for that, because if you were to say like, oh, what kind of monsters should they encounter? They'll just be like, I don't know, liches and trasks and stuff, and you're like, they're level 1, and they're like, I don't care, it'd be funny, kill them.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the second vote that we did in the game was, how does the crew of this pirate ship, it's not really a pirate ship, but that's visually that's what it looks like. Well, how does the crew of this ship react to the fact that the heroes are commandeering their vessel? And one of the answers was, well, the bad guy, they're opposed to the bad guy, so they're okay with us. The enemy of my enemy is, and the other one is, they're opposed to the bad guy, they're going to get us all killed.
Right.
And the thing that blows my mind, and that made me think this is 100% going to work, I in fact, not only is it going to work, I can do better as a designer. I can come up with more interesting things to put in front of chat that is going to make the game better, is that those two options were tied.
Yeah.
They were tied. People were role-playing. The people in chat didn't just say, well, I want to help the heroes. And there was another option, which is, we're going to do nothing, but that notion of, we're all going to die. Right? It wasn't like, let's attack them. That was not on the table. There was no make the encounter more difficult. That was not an option. It was purely just, how is the crew of the ship going to react? And I think so when you contextualize this interaction properly, then I do think that the people watching role play. Yeah. They get to role play being a member of the crew.
I think like with players at the table, though, I think sometimes they will take a combination of actor and director stance, right? Where some people will say,
sure, good for them.
Yeah, where some people will say, if I were in this universe as a member of, we had this happen with the Banner Saga show that we did. So we did a 4-part Banner Saga show for Hyper, and the fan interaction on that was, you are the caravan, and the caravan can do things that are ruthless or kind or neutral. And I think some people were voting like, if I were in this situation, if I were in the world like one of the players, I would probably do this. So my vote is going towards that. But there were people who were also saying, I want to see this happen. Like, I know that this complication will occur if the caravan is merciless, so I'm going to push that, and that's what I want. And that's really interesting too, the observer player, because that's a role that people at the table have too, where you'll say,
it's a good term for it, the observer player.
Yeah, where it's like, I want to do something, I want to affect the narrative, and sometimes I'm affecting it in a way that feels like I'm making this choice because, you know, Gorshak the Paladin would do this, but I'm also making these decisions because I want to put Gorshak in these positions to be interesting. All right, I want to create stuff for the narrative.
There are different. We have actor players, and we have tactician players, and we have. Why wouldn't there be the same dichotomies when it comes to the viewers? They have the same. The challenge is for us behind the screen, not giving them options that are just make the encounter more difficult, right? And that for me, that is a challenge. It's not something I've done before, but it's fun. It is a fun, interesting design challenge to say, how can I put options in front of the viewers that I don't like. For some reason, I don't like the term audience. The term audience seems really passive, but I don't. Yeah,
Think of them. Well, I think of them less as a modern movie audience and more like a kabuki audience or like a 1600s Shakespeare audience. There's a lot of
yeah,
shouting and
yeah,
throwing things and
yeah,
cheering, and they walk in
yeah.
and out of the room in the middle of the
Well,
play.
that's, I mean, what you're describing is, I think, the ideal, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're, this is something I learned, at least I think I've learned it. It's possible I'm wrong. A long time ago on Evolve, which was the last big AAA game I worked on,
Mm.
and we had a lot of streamers playing our game, and we got to know them. And I was the writer. I didn't have any business being involved in this. I was just interested in the relationship between the streamer and the audience and the video game and the developers.
Yeah.
And I became super, super interested in it. And I felt like I started to understand Twitch and it as a platform, and the idea that the whole purpose is the promise, not actually the reality,
Mm.
but the promise of interaction.
Yeah.
And that if you're not interacting, right, if you're not at least acknowledging the existence of chat, then it might as well just be a pre-recorded
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And so then that becomes the challenge, is how to integrate that into your game in a way that feels natural and is fun for you as a dungeon master or a game master. And for me, it's certainly fun knowing, and I couldn't come up with a poll this week. And the reason I couldn't come up with a poll this week was because I couldn't think of an option that wasn't obvious. I couldn't think of a poll. I couldn't think of here. I'm going to ask a question and give you answers. And every time I thought of something, I'm like, nope, they're all just going to pick this one.
Right.
That's the obvious one.
Yes.
And that's a bad poll. That's bad interaction. So we didn't have one this week. But yeah, I think that
Well, and that desire,
that notion of the audience being able to shout.
Yeah.
I've got an iPad. I apologize. I've got an iPad that sits next to me, and we have a channel in our Discord that only the moderators have access to. This is the public Discord we have, and it's the one where they know if I type something here, Matt will see it.
Yeah.
And that gives them the opportunity to tell us what chat, when someone shouts something really awesome in chat, I can hear it, quote unquote, because the mods paste.
Right, you have that filter there.
Yeah,
of the mods picking
great.
and choosing things.
Yeah, it's great. That is a great system, and so far it is working fantastically. And when people in chat say stuff like, suddenly they're making a lot of NetHack references because they were fighting mind flayers, and I genocided mind flayers.
Yeah.
And so we need to scroll a genocide. And I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the players like it when when they're talking about something awesome a player did. But that those filters are important. We're lucky that we have really good moderators. We're lucky that we have an audience that gets it. Our audience is really in tune with what we're doing.
Yeah, I think you can absolutely cultivate and train your audience like we have with roleplay. When I started with roleplay, it was a much more kind of esports style audience, much more traditionally like what you would expect from Twitch. When I would make a mistake in the rules, or we would do something with the rules that we wouldn't necessarily expect, and people would get upset about it, and they'd be honestly just like be shitty about it. But over time, we've been like, all right, this is the structure in which we need you to operate if you want to contribute. So now people who are new to the stream, when we do a rule that I've changed and they don't know, someone will be like, that's not how that works. And someone else in the audience who's been around a while will be like, okay, so here's a link to Adam's rulings document. Also, if they mess up a rule, you have to use the page number, right? Like give us a page number and we'll check it on the break. But for me, what I love about having chat there is that it's offloaded my need to remember every single detail of everything.
That's
right?
Yeah, like there's a wiki for your world. Right?
Yeah, well, like the number of times that I have been doing GM prep, either live on stream or just on my own, or just had an idea about the game and been like, what was the name of that tiefling from like episode 12? I cannot remember. I mentioned them once, and all I have to do is go on Twitter and be like, hey, who is this guy? And people are like, well, Adam, the guy was this guy. And it's so nice.
Without having to kind of like tell that, like my some of the players, not all of them, because some of them are busy and some of them run medium-sized video game companies. My players have on their own gone into our public Discord and gone into our subscriber-only channel in that Discord and just asked the viewers, like, hey, my character died. I'm thinking about playing a Tempest Cleric. Should I be a and then they get, so that notion of including the viewers in your decision-making process.
Oh, completely.
That some of the players really like, and the audience gets a huge kick out of, because they feel like it's that illusion of we're all doing this together.
Well, in Far Verona, Mark, whose character is a member of the High Church of the Messiah as Emperor, he goes into the high church channel. Is like, all right, boys, let's conspiracy here. And so
Yeah.
he has this whole other secret character motivation that I don't know or have anything to do with, that the
Nice.
members of the high church have worked with him on. They're like, all right, here's kind of what's going on in the politics. And if we had you, this like teleporting assassin in the world, this is probably what we would get you to do. And he's like, okay, cool. I'll think about that and like bring it into the game.
So tell me about Far Verona and tell me about the faction turn, because these are things that I do not wot of.
Yeah.
And that when I do my world building stream and I talk about Capital, which is the big city that the game is going to take place in, presuming they survive the Mind Flayers in the Astral Sea.
Assuming that.
There's definitely a very slim chance they'll
Yeah.
survive. That people are saying you should do what Adam does with the faction turn. And my reaction is, well, I don't want to do what Adam does, because then it's not what I would do. And sort of what
Right.
some people are paying for is they want to know what's the Matt Colville version of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm super interested in how, because what I thought I was going to do was I thought I was going to go to folks like you, people that I like and wish I could play games with, but we are too far away. Say, hey, why don't you play, if you're interested, pick one of these 7 characters and we're going to play this big game of diplomacy together.
Yeah.
And but the reason I haven't pulled the trigger on that, even though I think I could probably find 7 people that want to do it, is that I think a turn is going to be like a month, because of the pacing, because of the necessary pacing.
That's what it is for us.
Of a D&D game, that like which is, a game of diplomacy is supposed to be a 1 turn is half a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that the players are going to be able to maintain interest in what the hell's going on over the course of a month.
Yeah. So for us, for anybody who's not familiar, the Far Verona faction turn is an offshoot of In Stars Without Number, which is the game that we use to play Far Verona. There is a GM only solo diplomacy thing, basically, that Kevin Crawford designed. And he put in the game, and I used it for Swan Song, which was one of the first shows that I did on Twitch. And we streamed it, and it's basically just an Excel spreadsheet of various assets belonging to different galactic factions who are pitted against each other. And by default in the game, the GM controls all of those. The GM just kind of assigns them goals, moves them around, and takes turns for them, and they fight each other. And there's some randomness in the dice, but it's all one player essentially. And the reason that happens, the reason you do that is so that the game's world feels like it moves around on a scale the players have no access or control over, right? So you live in a country, and if your country goes to war with another country or not has nothing to do with you. You have to live in that country and do whatever it is you do, but you're not going to get a say in it necessarily if it happens. And so the same for this. And so what we did with Far Verona is that I turned over the factions. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is just diplomacy. I'm going to divide this up into the 13 factions in the universe of Far Verona, and I'm going to get players to control that. And we have hundreds. There's the active players, there's the people who hang out and talk about the lore, and then there's the total like volume of players. But I would say there's probably like several hundred people who are really actively engaged, and then probably twice or 3 times again that many people who are just around and interested in the lore and kind of participating. But basically what happens is they, like in old school D&D, each faction has a caller. They have a rep who I deal with. They give me the orders, and then I run them during the turn, and they're all submitting orders in secret, like with diplomacy. So we do once a month, we hang out and we do the turns, and all of the lore that follows from that, all of the fiction that emerges from that stuff changes the universe. So if one faction attacks another, that's going to change their fictional standing. So, House Crux and the Acre Corporation got in a big fight early on because Crux is the space cops and Acre is this big unfeeling corporation. They're like, okay, we're fighting now. And that brewed into an entire war that's been going on for 4 months that has nothing to do with the players, except that as they're being dragged along in the wake of it, because fictionally the universe is ahead of the players. So they're kind of catching up with this stuff as it comes. It turns on this dramatic irony thing where when a character meets an NPC, the people in the faction turn can be like, oh, this NPC belongs to this faction. So in a couple of months in game time, we know they're going to turn on the Empire, right? Their faction is going to get betrayed. And we've had characters who, as they play, the faction reality of their character has changed. And like Bronze Girl has had a character leave the show because she's like, oh, my house is falling out of favor. And I know that in the future, like she'll this will turn into a bad situation where the other players will have to turn on me. So I'm going to like find a way to retire this character. and
Well,
then
plus
watch
that gives
that
you the
stuff
opportunity to
change.
bring that character back.
Well,
At, you know,
so that's the thing, and because she's paying attention to it, she knows that if her character leaves the imperial houses today and goes and becomes a space pirate, that there is several months down the line amnesty for these space pirates by way of House Fornax, and they get brought in as privateers of the Empire. So she could rejoin the party in a different outfit several months down the line, having showed that the universe changes. And this is stuff that I could theoretically do myself. Like I could create a universe that's this dynamic, but I
yeah.
like being surprised too.
Oh, sure. That's
Right?
part of the
Like
fun.
that's what's so
Yeah.
cool for me is having to adapt to that. It feels like rolling on a random table of political events, right? Where
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what's going to happen. And so I have to just like run with it, which
a
is really
big
cool.
part, this is one of the things I like about 5th edition, and specifically I think this is Mike Merle's attitude, is a big part of being a dungeon master. And if you don't know this when you get started, then you're not going to build it into your game, is giving yourself opportunities to react to things.
Yeah.
Whether that is, you've got your players and they're always going to give you stuff to react to, but stuff like the poll that we do every week, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like the faction turn in your game, stuff like just rolling on a chart in D&D, like and we're going to use this wand of a wonder. I have no idea what's going to happen, the wild magic shard, right? Not knowing what's going to happen is super important, because I think that how the dungeon master or the game master reacting to things is the birth of improv. Right. That's how you start making things up, and you're inspired. And it doesn't feel like you did anything special, just that you rolled on this chart and it got a result. It fired an idea in your head. And that excitement over that new idea carried you through the implementation of it.
Right. And I think
improv the whole thing. And
I think people get scared of that though, right? People like, because it's anti-prep. It's this idea that
it's the difference between not knowing.
No.
Which is terrifying, and knowing that you're going to produce an unknown result.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's going to happen is terrifying, but saying I know that there's going to be a deck of cards and the players are going to draw from it. I just have no idea what they're going to draw. That is a very different thing. Right now, it's not this just empty void in which you're sitting terrified. It's this anticipation of an unknown result. I guess that's the best way of putting it. Ignorance is different than the anticipation of an unknown result.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, it's like you don't feel anxious when someone gives you a present. Well, maybe you do, but if somebody gives you a Christmas present,
you're excited.
Yeah. You're like, there's going to be something cool in here, I hope, because
exactly,
you know the game, like the game, the players, and you know that Christmas present isn't going to be full of shit covered piranhas. Like you can expect that it might be something exciting and stressful in the sense that you don't know what to do, but it's going to be something cool that might fit at least generally with the structures of your game. There's a game it's a Japanese game that got translated into English called Tenrybancho Zero, where you are explicitly, as players, you are not allowed to predetermine what your character thinks or feels about any of the other characters or NPCs in the game. You are not allowed to say, I like this character, I don't like this character. What happens is, as soon as you interact with each other for the first time on screen, like on stage, you lock eyes and you roll on the relationship table and you're like, oh yes, Kenishiro, I hate you. And Kenishiro is like, aha, good to see you, Heihachi. We are in love. And that's what you have to do, where you're like, Kenishiro loves Heihachi, but Heihachi hates Kenishiro. And there you go. There's your drama. And that happens with every significant NPC and with all the PCs. And after the first act, once everybody gets all kind of put together, you're just living with that. You're like, okay, cool. What does this do to the plot? How does this change the game that we're playing? And what is this?
Well, this is something you talked about in a recent live stream you did where people were asking questions. And you said something that I really very strongly disagreed with. But I think I just need to. I think it's because I'm a step behind. I think I've got an old school solution, an old school attitude that works, and that is kind of blinding me to other things that would either work or even be better. And that is that notion of the DM telling the players how they feel about things.
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this. Yeah.
And that is not something. That is something that I'm on the record as saying, don't do that. But I think I'm specifically thinking of stuff like when they walk into a room and say there's an anvil in the middle of the floor, there's a fireplace, there's a bunch of metal tools, everything's covered in soot, everything that's wooden has been burned away, and the players go, oh, this was a blacksmith shop and there was a fire. That to me is the proper series of events. Is I just described everything and then they came to a conclusion. I don't tell them, you walk into a room, it's a blacksmith shop, there was a fire. But you're right, I don't. But that to me is kind of I might as well just be writing a novel.
Right.
But that notion of telling the players how they feel about stuff is something I think it depends on the players, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of old
Well,
school player probably wouldn't be comfortable with it. But I think a
yeah.
modern player who doesn't have those assumptions, and why would they? I think that, especially letting them know, setting expectations like, look, there are going to be times where I'm just going to tell you how your character feels about something, and it's up to you to determine how you react to that.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of games that influence the way I think about this. Predominantly, Pendragon, right? King Arthur Pendragon is a
Oh, yeah,
game
yeah,
about your
yeah.
character telling you how they feel about things.
Yeah.
Monster Hearts does this really well. But I was thinking about this the
Oh,
other
I think I
day.
watched, was Monster Hearts the game I watched you streaming with Ashley Nova?
Maybe I've played.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we played. We did a
Yeah.
one shot of it.
That's
But
how I discovered her, and now I follow her on Twitch.
yeah,
So
so it's
that was
Monster
awesome.
Hearts. Monster Hearts does so in Pendragon, you're playing Arthurian knights who are Arthurian knights. You cannot play a knight of the round table who is not at least in some way struggling with like being chaste and brave and
Yeah.
whatever, doing Arthurian shit.
Yeah.
The game will not let you. Sometimes your knight will leave your hands and be like, I am going to go and do this thing, and too bad for you, right?
Right.
And then in Monster Hearts, your characters are playing emotionally volatile teenage monsters who have
Yes.
feelings that they cannot control. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
GM can say to you, you feel turned on by
Yeah.
seeing the
Yeah.
werewolf quarterback
That
rip off his shirt. And you're like, cool,
yeah.
I thought my character was straight and I'm getting turned on by this. So I respond like by running away, or I get angry or whatever.
Sure.
You can choose how you respond. Yeah.
Have a human reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the thing, and I
That
was
was,
thinking
you
about
said that
this.
stream. I apologize. I have to interrupt you
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this
do
is
it.
so important. This is so important. You said in the stream that I was watching, you go, we do not control our feelings.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, that was when the light bulb went off over my head. And I'm like, oh, it's right. No, we don't. Like, why should the players at all times never being challenged, no exceptions? Why should they always be allowed to control their character's feelings when that is not how the world works?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that started the wheels in my head turning. So continue.
Well, it just gets into this whole thing about like objectivity versus subjectivity, right? Like if you were the GM,
Yeah.
like here's the thing. You're reading an adventure, you're reading the box text of a published adventure, and the box text says the players enter a room, and in the center of the room there is a beautiful marble statue. My thought is, fuck you. You don't know what beauty is. Like, I get to make that decision. Maybe I think this is an ugly marble statue. Maybe my character's culture like thinks that this is like offensive or hideous or whatever. So these ideas of like telling the players things that are universally true, I think the old school solution to that is a neutral kind of referee style description of just saying the statue is X tall and Y wide, made of N material, and that's it, right? You make your own call.
And there's classic language, like it's finely carved,
right?
Which is classic language for it's beautiful, right? But I don't want to tell you that. I just want to say it was really well made, right? And then
and it's like you see this NPC and they are X value of comeliness instead of being like, yo, he's hot. Like it's not, because you can't. So it's one of those things where you can go sort of too far on it and be like, you see this statue built in this style and this culture would consider it to be very beautiful because of their history with this deity, or the goddess of beauty, who is like this. And you can spin that out into novel territory and just George R.R. Martin your players to death. But I think when it comes down to telling players their characters' emotions, it's like that unexpected random table thing, right? It's like saying to them, like, you get permission in advance.
That's their version of it.
Yeah, you talk to them and you say, you can't control your feelings. I may tell you though, like if your character has an emotional response to something, and then that's me throwing you a bone. That's me saying like, why did you feel this way, right? Like, why did you feel tense in the presence of this character that you should otherwise have felt like fine about? It's another way for me to feed information. But yeah, I could definitely see players saying like, no, I don't feel that way. Stop telling me what my character feels. Yeah.
And I have been that player who would probably be like, I would need to know going into it. That's why like the way you describe Monster Hearts is like teenagers aren't in control of their feelings, man.
Totally.
And so that is totally makes sense to me, but that would be built into the pitch. That would be built in the pitches. You're often going to find yourself. And I tried to do that a little tiny bit with the Chain of Acheron because I wanted that Pendragon feeling. And I think this is because Greg Stafford passed away. And so that was what was in my head, was that notion of like, there was the first game where you had to have a vice.
Yeah.
You had to have like that notion, the way he talked about it in terms of like somebody who's an alcoholic can't decide not to take a drink.
Yeah.
what is your version of that? What is your character's, and so I went to the players and I said, who in your past, if they discovered you were still alive, would swear to kill you, to hunt you down and kill you? Who in your past, if they discovered you were still alive, would it break their heart? Right? What would you betray the company for? What would you betray the company for? And the players had really interesting answers to those first two questions without being prompted. But that third question, the number one answer was, I would never betray the company.
Right, of course. And that's the thing. It's always that. It's always that. If you give them the option to say nothing, it's like, well, that's the least. I'm giving you so much to play with here, and that's why leading questions are so important. Like, what is the thing? And nothing is not that you can't answer that. It's like there is.
Well,
something.
And what I would say was, and this is all conversations I've had offline, what we didn't do collectively, was like my friend Lars was like, there's nothing I would betray the company for. And I just looked at him and said, well, that's a really bad character then, isn't it? Right? And you could see him kind of go, okay, like, is it? And we talked about the fact, I'm like, man, you're a cleric. What if your god said, I need you to do this thing that is, and he was like, and he tried to kind of like worm his way out of it a little bit, but I pinned him to it. And my other friend, Phil, he runs a video game company. He's the lead, he's the art director. It's his job to make characters. So when his reaction was, there's nothing I would betray the company for, I was like, let's imagine that your character was the main character in a AAA GTA style video game. Wouldn't we learn a lot about that character? Wouldn't they have vices? Wouldn't they have a past? And you can see the light bulb go off over his head. And he's like, oh yeah. Because suddenly now he's like, oh, that would make the character way cooler if I had this, right? So that was the process of me trying to figure out for each player, what was the thing? How not just how do I ask, not just what's the question I'm asking, how do I contextualize the question so get it, right? So they don't feel like, Matt just wants information so he can screw me. Right. It's like, well, yeah, because it's going to be dramatic.
Well, it's a huge difference between choose a flaw for your character from the list of flaws and then a contextualized in-universe drama creating opportunity. But I think the trouble is that a lot of people see their characters as finished at character creation. They're like, this is my character's alignment, this is my stats, this is my class, and I will never change. Like I'm just going to advance. I'm going to get bigger and better and more what I already am.
Yeah, and my game of choice is and always has been Dungeons and Dragons, and there has never been an edition of Dungeons and Dragons that has ever said your character is not done ever. Your character is a work in progress.
Yeah.
And that the journey you're going to go on, I could be wrong. There could be stuff like that. No, I don't think I am. I don't think there's ever been a player's handbook. There might be DM's guides that have advice about this, but I don't think there's ever been a player's handbook that said part of your job is discovering your character's arc. And which implies or is explicit that your character is going to have an arc.
Yeah.
Right. And that there's stuff that's going to that getting from the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign is not just accumulating golden XP and levels and more abilities. It's also accumulating the narrative, the beginning, middle, and end of your character. And that it could be tragic or comic or tragio-comic or,
Right. You have lots of options.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. We're going to find out together. And just being open to that.
The thing, too, is that like there's so many concrete unchangeable by default choices in Dungeons and Dragons. It's like we live in fucking Soviet Russia where the government has said to you, you are working in this factory now. This is your life forever and ever. You are factory worker. Right. Like you are a fighter. You have made this choice. You can multi-class into other things, but you will never not be a fighter. Right. And this is what I loved about playing Adventurers League. Adventurers League is like, I don't know, just fight up until level 5, change your class, change your character's race, just try everything until you settle on something that you like. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. But I think that if you're playing a character and you're not thinking about those kinds of conflicts, especially if you're playing a warlock or a paladin or a cleric, and you're not thinking about divided loyalty, you're not playing those character types correctly.
And serving two masters.
Right. And that stuff is such good grist for the narrative mill.
Well, and that was kind of the process is my best friend, who is a inveterate tactical gamer, comes to RPGs through things like Final Fantasy, which is a deeply tactical game. He wanted to game the answer. Well, I worship abstract concepts like fire and water and air and earth, and therefore my god's not going to show up and say blah blah blah. And so what I did was, I can do this because he is not only my friend, he is my employee. I said, this is not an option most dungeon masters have. I said, well, guess what? It's your job to go invent the pantheon of the place that your dude is from. and it's going to be gods with personalities and backstories. And that's the road we're going down. That's going to get him to a place where his god could show up and tell him to do something that is antithetical to the goals of the chain, and he's going to have to make a decision. And he so far is doing a great job with it and seems to really like it, because he's like, oh, I think it would be cool. He goes, he's asked me questions about Legend of the Five Rings. He's like, is it that the gods, each house is descended from a god, so there's this personality and each house is named after the god they descended from? And I'm like, I think so. He goes, oh, because he's like, I made that up. And then I was like, wait, isn't this L5R? And for me, watching him go through this burgeoning designer process, my friend Lars did a lot of the design in Strongholds and Followers, the retainer stuff he did, it's really exciting for me. And it's going to result in I get a free Pantheon. Well, it's not free. He's in play, like I said. Yeah. But I'm going to get a Pantheon done, and we're going to end up with a character who serves a god that has a personality and an attitude and can tell him to do things. And yeah, I think that that's a big part of why I like Paladins, is because they have they serve a god and have a code. And as soon as you have those things, then you have to think about what happens when they are challenged.
It's so boring playing a character who is so like morally murky that you like. I know that for a brief period in the 90s we all wanted to be like gray area edgelords, but like it's so boring when you have this flexible moral code, because you have nothing to stand for. You have nothing that's like a challenge to that. I love absolute statements. I love when players are like, I would never, I always, I could never be convinced to, like these ideas of like, this is how my character sees the world and I will never, because I'm always like, yeah, bullshit. Let me try.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a good point.
It's fun when they take a hard stance, knowing that I will push on that the harder your stance, the more likely I am to say, what if this wasn't true, right? If you like, and this is just my fucking Burning Wheel training, where it's like, you set your beliefs for the character, and it's the GM's job to challenge and complicate those beliefs to the point where you're like, I am a paladin, I would never disobey an order from a superior. And then you have your superior be like, cool, go burn down that orphanage. And you're like, but we're lawful good, sir. And they're like, go do it.
Oh, what? Well, I don't know if this is good dungeon mastering or good writing,
right,
or just the way I do it, but I've always felt like the goal of the dungeon master should be to place the players in situations where there is no right answer and they have to choose something.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if there's an obvious right answer, so all we're talking about is saying, put the players in a situation where there's no right answer, and now taking it and contextualizing it for an individual and saying, I know that you said you would never betray blah, 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 but now I'm going to put you in a situation where you have to. There's no, and you have this Hobson's choice of, these are both terrible. Now what do we do?
Yes,
because that's where I think drama.
Well, but the thing is, I think a lot of GMs have been trained to think of like specific solutions to stuff, to be like, the way to solve the puzzle in the narrative, the way to defeat this boss, the way to deal with this particular challenge is this. Maybe there are some second or third tier options for it, but I've already thought of them. So anything the players will think of will have to be one of these three things. I am not responsible for solutions. Just put your players in a dangerous place that is hard for them, and then you're like, cool, find your way out of this.
This is the synthesis of dungeon mastering, that is what we're talking about. Is that notion, what we talked about earlier, about how we should always be putting ourselves in places, not where we have no idea what's going to happen, that's terrifying, but where we're looking forward to an unknown result.
Yes.
Like there's a deck of cards, I don't literally mean like the deck of many things, I just mean in general, there's a deck of cards they're going to draw from, and it's not until they draw that I go, ooh, and I, the dungeon master, know. And that is the same as, I'm going to put you in a situation where there is no good solution. It's all the solutions are terrible, and I have no idea what you're going to do. Your reaction, how the players react to that, is that act of drawing from the deck, going, "Oh, is this what's going to happen? Is this what I just rolled on this wild magic table, and now I get this crazy thing that inspires me as a dungeon master?" I am going to be just as inspired when the players say, "Screw it, let's not do either of these things. Let's change the conditions of the test." That's where I'm like, "Ooh," and that's super exciting. That's where dungeon mastering happens, is right in that space.
It's that the sort of fundamental principle of Apocalypse World and of Dungeon World, where we say, play to find out what happens, right? Come to the table not with solutions, but with stakes questions, right? To say, I wonder what will happen when, or I wonder what will the result of this situation be, or when they meet these characters for the first time, how will they react? And it's about you finding out from your players what they're interested in and how they will drive the narrative, and then it's about just playing to find out what the end result is, not saying how will they get to this end result, which I think is interesting that we've kind of landed here because we spent so much time talking about like nudging the narrative towards certain moments or that kind of thing. Yeah.
We have like 9 minutes left.
Yeah.
Before I've got to go. Is there anything we need to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I mean, yes, probably. Right, almost certainly. But I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. No. I mean, Dune, I guess. We haven't talked about Dune yet.
We haven't. Well, because I threatened and I still intend to fly you down and play the Dune board game. But so far we've just been so wrapped up in, like, you were even down here.
I was
a perfect opportunity to do it, except we were in the middle of launching our campaign. So that was
well, maybe when the movie comes out, I'll fly down to LA.
No, we're not waiting that long. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen this year. It's going to happen this year. It may be after our next Kickstarter.
Okay.
But it may be before that. Depends on how things go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you're paying attention to the Dune casting. Oh, like, is your interest? All I know about you and Dune is that you love that board game.
I do,
because you're a educated and cultured person. Do you have any kind of fandom for the novels?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love the first book. I like the second and third book. I don't acknowledge any other Dune ephemera. I've been paying attention because this is a thing that happens when you become a content creator on the internet. You express interest in stuff and then people will tweet things at you. So you don't actually have to go looking for information. People will just be like,
that's how I find
out this? And I'm like,
that's how I find out who's been cast in Dune.
Right. That's the thing. People just Dune tweet me. So yeah, I mean, I've always really liked it. I like Imperial sci-fi. Obviously Far Verona is like hugely inspired by the stuff in the setting. So
I'm happy to see that, like, between Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa and the guy from No Country for Old Men, whose name escapes me off the top of my head, that it's not exclusively white dudes.
Yes,
because that was going to be a huge problem if the House Atreides was not Josh. It's funny that I said the guy from No Country for Old Men, and chat went Josh Brolin, and I'm like,
no, the other guy, Javier Bardem.
That's correct. That's not who I meant. I meant Javier Bardem. Right. That, like, Javier Bardem is he's not an Anglo-Saxon dude, and neither is Oscar Isaac, and so that is good because I think that movie was going to be in a lot of trouble if they released a movie about
yes. I mean, white dudes. It's still struggling a little bit because it's like white people and then a mixture of brown folks, which is like fine. Like I mean, this goes back to Dune as a thing, and like the fact that Frank Herbert was not exactly like the best at like interpreting and positing a narrative that sort of belongs to other people, right? There's a ton of stuff in there that he was just kind of like, like I've heard about this, I'm going to use it for the Fremen.
Yeah. He was a reporter, and so he would do his reporter thing of kind of like doing some research and calling it good. Look, I learned like by like hyphen. These are real words. Allah Malmathal. These are real words in Arabic, the real terms, and a lot of real Arabic culture is in there, but not authentically. Not authentically. And for 1965, that no one was doing that in 1965. No one was writing a book that had that kind of explicit Arabic influence in it. And that was one of the things that I loved when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And this is my I don't have a problem. This is my kind of, they're making that movie and that's great, and I'll wait and see what happens. But I'm kind of like over here trying to kind of ignore it because it's not 1965 anymore.
Yeah, right.
Like I can take that book. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say the thing is now, like, one, I think it's okay to enjoy stuff that isn't like the way it should be now. Like he's a problematic fave, and it's something that's cool for certain reasons, but also like he's got some problems. Like if Saladin Ahmed wrote Dune, it'd be a whole other fucking thing, and it would be much better.
It would be. That's a great. Because one of the things I'm not looking forward to, and I've already started to see it. I've had to unsubscribe from the /r/Dune subreddit. Is people who want to act as though you can only be a fan of that novel. If you believe that there is zero problem with the way Herbert represented
Yo,
both.
welcome to the whole ass internet. You can either love something 100% or you are a betrayer and do not deserve to say you like it.
I will always love that book, and I will always, I'm not a Dune apologist per se, but it's very easy for me to recognize that there's some problematic shit in that book. That Dune is fundamentally a book about a white dude who Arabs better than all the Arabs, so they make him their king.
Right. Not only that, he woman's better than women, and the stand-in Arabic culture, their entire religion is fake and made up by a white lady.
Correct. Yes. That stuff is problematic. And I'm able to recognize that. I'm an adult. I can hold contradictory ideas in my head at the same time. But at the same moment, I can be like, for 1965, this was amazing. For me in 1985, this was amazing and informative. But that doesn't mean that we should be doing 1965 in 2019. Right? That's where things get muddy and murky for me. I am perfectly capable of saying, yes, Dune is those things, but it's a whole shitload more. And there are people who want to argue that because it is actually a lot more than just that it's actually not problematic. I'm like, no. It is problematic. It is also way more, and there's a lot more complex stuff going on. We can hold these ideas, we can think complex thoughts together, but people don't want to do that. That's why I'm like, I don't want to promote 19. That's the thing. I love Dune. If you like science fiction, go read that book. You'll probably really like it. But I don't want to do 1965 in 2019. I want to leave it in 1965. That's my attitude. Or for me, in 1985.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think that it's cool. I like Dune. I'm interested in seeing how it gets interpreted into a visual medium, and I'll go see it, and hopefully it'll be really cool. But I've already got the book. Like, this is the thing, is that when you love something, adaptations of it cannot take away from it. They'll give you maybe different perspective on it, or get you to see it through someone else's eyes, in this case the director and the cast and the cinematographer and everything, but it's not going to change. When I go back and read the book is the same as it was before the movie came out. I
still have the book. It's rare but possible that a sequel to something or an interpretation of something can actually I like The Matrix a lot less than I did before those sequels.
Right.
I like Highlander a lot less than I did before. So it is possible to add to something or interpret something, but it's super rare. Typically, I would have loved Jodorowsky's Dune. I would have loved it.
Yeah.
But not because I thought it was a faithful adaptation, because I could see that this dude was inspired and put the things he loved into it. That's the point of an adaptation. So I don't have any kind of I had a friend of mine who was a prolific RPG writer and designer, who I quite liked, good person, but who had a real problem with the Lord of the Rings adaptation. And he said, and this is a quote, "I don't understand. It's already there. Just film every sentence."
Yeah. Just
for him, it was the simplest thing in the world. What could be simpler?
Just like Zack Snyder did right up until the end of Watchmen. And look, it worked out great. Just use it as a storyboard. It won't be boring at all.
Good example. That was my complaint with Sin City. I saw nothing of Robert Rodriguez in there. It was literally just Frank Miller's comic filmed. And I was like, I don't need that. I've already got the comic. So if you're not going to, I thought Zack Snyder, I can't believe we're talking about Zack Snyder. That being said,
right, yes,
I think that dude improved on Watchmen. I think that Alan Moore should have known that you can't have a dude named Dr. Manhattan in your book and not have him explode. Right? And Zack Snyder's solution was better than a fucking giant squid that was just an genetically engineered alien psychic squid. What are you doing?
Well, so that's adaptation. The great danger of adaptation is, and it's like translation, right? I read an interview with a translator, and I think maybe we've even talked about this before, but there was a guy, they did a new translation of Camus' The Stranger, right? They retranslated L'Étranger, and they changed one line. Everything else about it was basically exactly the same, except instead of at the beginning, it was they changed the line about mother died today, and they slightly shifted the way that they said it in English, and then it just the existentialist philosophy community just blew up about it, because they were like, no, this is, you're taking liberty, you are changing the text, how dare you? This is the accepted translation, and I think that it's when you're adapting something,
Yeah.
how much of yourself are you allowed to put in, right? Are you allowed to change the ending? Can you change mama, right? Like how much of this control do you have as a translator? Because that's what Zack Snyder is doing. He's
Yeah.
translating from the language of comics to the language of film, and this is what we see, especially now, day in day out, like all of these movies coming out that are based on other stuff, and it's
Yeah.
like, how much are you willing to allow someone to
It,
put their
it's
own fingerprints on it?
I mean, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but Americans have a very uneasy relationship with art.
Mm,
It's not, you know, we were for a long time a fundamentally puritanical society, and there's a lot of that still left over. And so that notion of like, we tend, a lot of people tend to judge the success or failure of an adaptation based on how faithful it is. And I'm not, I have 0% interest in how faithful it is. I am more interested in, was the author inspired? Was the author of the adaptation inspired? And can I see that inspiration?
yeah.
Right? Like I can see what Peter Jackson loved about the Lord of the Rings when I watched those movies.
Right.
And there are some things I would have done differently, right? There are some things that I think are sort of like an assault on the books, but I 100, those were very successful movies. I found them very entertaining. And I definitely feel like I can see the stuff he loved is in those books, it's in those movies, and that's their job. So like, if you're not going to do that, so I'm super interested to see what Denis Villeneuve does, because the casting so far with Dune indicates to me he is making a very different movie than the one I have in my head. He's making a
Yeah.
movie in which Raban plays a big part,
Right.
because he cast Dave Bautista, who is doing pretty good as far as having an acting career, and he's growing over time, and he's showing he's got some range, which surprises me. And meanwhile, he's got Jason Momoa, who has no range, is very charismatic,
Yeah.
basically only good when you let him play himself, as somebody who needs range and is important. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be really interesting to see what happens in this movie.
Yeah, I really liked Batista in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I think he'll be a great Beast Raban. Yeah, I
But
think
that guy has
it's
like literally 3 lines of dialogue in the entire book.
yeah,
Like
but he
that.
was also like fairly small in Blade Runner, right? He was only kind of in at
Yeah,
the
that's true.
beginning, which
Yeah.
I think if they utilize him well, albeit briefly, it's like I'll be happy with it. It'll be fine. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, the movie lives and dies on Lady Jessica and like
Oh, really?
how that works. Yeah, because like Paul is just kind of like a whiny teenager,
He's a
and then
slut.
he's a whiny teenager messiah. For me, Jessica is the bit, right? She's the thing that ties all the stuff together. So yeah, I think I'm so curious to see how it goes.
It's going to be tricky, because I think that 1984 movie, 84, 82, 84, that 1984 movie, with all of its problems, and there are many, it's largely an incomprehensible mess. I don't know that this is a better cast, right? I don't know
Well,
that this.
yeah.
I don't know this is going to, So
I mean, it's
it's
very much as Dune was in the 80s. It's and this sounds so dismissive of these actors and their craft. It's flavor of the month. It's like these are actors people give a shit about right now. It's not as
yeah,
if we're going broad and wide to find the exact perfect people. It's we're finding the people that will put butts in the seats, right?
yeah.
And
Well,
people that the
yeah,
director likes. And that's
yeah,
how movies get made.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily a better or worse cast. It's just like here's what we got today.
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting. It's got a bunch of actors that I love in it. I love Josh Brolin. I love Oscar Isaac. I love Javier Bardem. And
Mm.
so just that cast alone, I would go see this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's one of those properties where I have to see it in the theater no matter what. Like it could get the worst reviews. It
Yeah,
could get like I love going to the movies. I've seen movies I knew would be worse. So
yeah,
there's no way that Dune will be worse than say like the 2 Resident Evil movies I saw in the theater or any number of Underworld
yeah. I
films
saw
or
Underworld in the
yeah,
theater, and
like
I
I
it was
love
being
going to the movies enough that it doesn't really matter if the movie is good or not. It's going to exist
sure.
and I'm interested in going and seeing it.
I'm the same way, 100%. I love going to the movies, and so when people ask, like, I'm often entertained by stuff that's awful,
Yes.
but part of that is just I like going to the movies.
Yeah.
Uh, Adam, I have a whole bunch of crap I've got to get done if I'm going to stay on schedule.
Yeah, I was gonna say we could if we don't stop, we will
Yes.
never stop.
No.
So
Correct.
we'll put paid to it now. If by some whatever the opposite of a miracle is, people watching this do not know who you are, Matt Colville, please educate the people. Who are you? What do you do? Where can they find you doing those things?
I'm a writer and designer, and I have a YouTube channel about how easy and fun it is to run D&D. And now we stream our D&D game on Wednesday nights on Twitch, and we've got a supplement for 5th edition that we wrote and designed that I'm pretty happy with, and we're working on the sequel to it book was called Strongholds and Followers, and it's got a whole bunch of really cool mechanics in it. And every day now I'm seeing people using them and tweeting at me about their experiences with it. It makes me super happy. So check out the book, check out the YouTube channel, check out the Twitch stream.
Do it.
And there's more coming.
Nice. Yeah, I got to hang out and watch you guys play some D&D the other day. It was very entertaining.
Well, I mean, we're having fun. I don't know how watchable it is.
You'll never know. You'll never know the answer to that. People will tell you, and you will watch it yourself, and you will never know how good it is because it's impossible. It's too.
We had a lot of people who tuned into the first episode and were like, "This is just a bunch of people sitting around playing D&D," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what you thought." I don't know if that was going to happen.
I tuned into Twitch and I saw this guy playing a video game, and I was like, "This is just a guy playing a video game." I went to a McDonald's, I ordered a Big Mac, and I'm like, "This is just a hamburger."
Well, it's not like we're going to be playing D&D anyway, so we might as well stream it, and that's our goal. So if people like watching, I think that watching D&D is very much an acquired taste.
Yeah.
Right. But that being said, it also, for me, the thing that I think is definitely going to be a success is the story that comes out of it. Like already the campaign diaries, the chronicle that I write every week, which is kind of fictionalized what happens, for me are super interesting. So I think we'll all come out the back end of this with this epic story.
Yeah.
And also some people are going to get to, I'm really happy with people who watch and say, wow, Matt just directly asked his players how they felt about something. I never thought about doing that. And I'm like, look there, the stream works. You tuned in for 20 minutes and you went, whoa, Matt just did this thing I never thought about. That's cool. I want to do that. And I'm like, that's all. Is that the same thing as it's watchable? I don't know. But it means that people are finding like it's running the game is easy and fun, and there's all sorts of interesting little tricks you can bust out. And the more people who do it on live and you can watch, then the more ideas you get and the more different examples you have. And I think the more people will do it.
I agree. Definitely go check out Matt's stuff. Check out this campaign. There is time enough to get in on the ground floor. If you're the kind of person that wants to like watch a show early on, you've only got a couple episodes you got to watch to catch up, and you can watch it live. That's right.
Adam, thank you very much for having me on. I love the stuff you do. I love being part of this. We should definitely do it again.
It has been my absolute pleasure. I guess I'll see you again in 6 months.
Less than that. Let's hope.
Let's try to not wait so long for the next time. Cool. Well, thanks for coming, Matt. If you're watching this and you don't know, you're probably in my house. So this is my Twitch channel. I'm Adam Coble. You can find me on Twitter at Skinny Ghost. I GM 3 Dungeons and Dragons games and a game of Stars Without Number every week, and you can find those in all the various places. Imagine how many games
you would stream if you liked Dungeons.
Yeah, right. And I fucking hate D&D. I hate it. It's so I'm just
Adam
I love
is making fun of the people who criticize him.
I love D&D.
This is the difference, by the way, between the audience and the DMs. I think that being a dungeon master is very much a process of becoming a designer. And starting to think in terms of design. And a game designer is somebody who can play the best game in the world and think of ways to change it or improve it.
Yeah. So you can see me doing that twice a week at twitch.tv/D&D and twice a week over at twitch.tv/ItMeJP for roleplay. Otherwise, Twitter's the place. I also made a role-playing game called Dungeon World. You should check it out. I think it's pretty good.
Award-winning Dungeon World.
That's right. Award-winning tabletop role-playing game Dungeon World, made it with my friend Sage. That's it for us. I'm gonna free Matt from the astral prison that is my channel, and we will see all of y'all next time. Bye, everybody.